لا إله إلا الله 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 لا إله إلا الله جود علينا.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. After praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending salutations, peace and blessings upon the best of creation, the jewel and crown of creation, the beloved of Allah Almighty, the coolness to our eyes, the purpose of our lives, the reviver of our hearts, the inspirer to our minds, the awakener of our souls, the most honored one, the most praised one, the most generous one, the most kind one. Undoubtedly, He is the most beautiful one. None other than Sayyiduna Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa barak wa sallam. I'm going to start today's Jummah's short lecture slightly different and probably take a leaf out of Imam Adil's book and ask you, what did I speak about last Friday? Now you probably say we weren't here, so we're out of the question. For those who were here last Friday, what did I speak about? Kamran Sahib, तुसी कोई मोबाइल पर तखीर हो के नोट लिखे ने? What did I speak about last Friday in the Jummah lecture? I mentioned children, yes. What else did I mention? See this relationships.
Respecting your parents.
Respecting your parents. The elders. What else? What else? You're missing the main part of the speech at the start. You're still missing the main part. These were all points right at the end. There was a game I mentioned, yeah. Yeah, I mentioned that. Yes. No need to shout. Yes, I mentioned the game, yeah. Watching and observing your children, yes. But you're missing something. I started my speech. Islamic calendar, yes. That was my actual first point. Then yes, which month? Yes, Safar. Then? And that's the one. Kamran Sahib's nailed it. The main crux of my speech, although I concluded it relating to the youth and the children, was about friendship and what the friends we keep and so on and so forth. But the most important friendship is friendship with Allah. Our friendship with Allah Almighty. How do we define friendship with Allah? How do we understand this concept? Allah talks about this concept. Allah talks about this in Al-Quran Al-Kareem when He said, أَلَا إِنَّ أَوْلِيَاءَ اللَّهِ لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ لَهُمُ الْبُشْرَى فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ لَا تَبْدِيلَ لِكَلِمَاتِ اللَّهِ ذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. So I spoke about the friendship. And then in the month of Safar, how many of Allah's friends, awliya and salihin, righteous people, good people, men of goodness, men of good character, men of knowledge, men of piety, God-fearing men, how they passed away in this month of Safar. And I mentioned some names. Some of the names that I mentioned was who? I mentioned Sayyidina Sheikh Zakaria Bahauddin Multani Rahmatullah alayh, and also Hazrat Data Ali bin Uthman Hujweri Data Ganjbaksh Rahmatullah alayh, and Sayyidina Sultan Salahuddin Al-Ayubi, Sayyidina Imam Hassan ibn Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. Mawla Ali radiyallahu anhu's eldest son, Sayyidina Hassan, he passed away in Safar. And we spoke about, a name I mentioned was the great Imam Rabbani, Sayyidina Mujaddid Al-Thani Ahmad Sarhandi Al-Faruqi Rahmatullah alayh. Imam Rabbani, that's his title. He was known as Al-Imam Al-Rabbani. And also Hazrat Ala Huzur Pir Sayyid Meher Ali Shah Sahab of Gulra Sharif. These are some of the great men of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In history it is recorded that they passed away in the month of Safar, this month we are currently passing through. And another one of the great Imams of this Ummah that passed away is the Imam that we all love, honor and respect. One of the great Imams in the last 150 years. His title is known as Ala Hazrat Azimul Martabat Mujaddid Deen Millat. The great Allama Shah Ahmad Rida Muhaddis Breli, whose origins and roots go back to Uttar Pradesh in India. And the locality in India where he was specifically from was an area, a town called Breli. And those who align to his way of thinking and following, which is the way of the Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, they have been titled and labeled as Brelvis. However, we know that in that time, in the subcontinent, 150 years ago, there was many fitnas. Many fitans. Fitan of the Salafis, the fitan of Ahl Tashayyu', the fitan of the Ghair Muqallideen, the fitan and the mischief of other sects that existed at that time. Qadianis, Ahmadiyya, Mirzaiya, they were rising at that time. And the fitna of the Deobandiyya and others as well. There were many fitnas that existed in India at that time. And we have to remember the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, very important. Mentioned in the Sunan of Abi Dawood. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, he said, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, inna Allah ta'ala yab'athu ala ra'si kulli mi'ati sanatin man yujaddidu laha dina. That certainly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send at the start or at the end of every century one or a few men who will revive the religion. They will do tajdeedud deen. They will not bring a new religion, but what will they do? They will revive the religion. So when people get misguided, when people lose their way, when people will be embroiled in innovations, when people will leave the Quran, the teachings of the Quran, people in that time would leave the Sunnah, they would adopt other ideologies, khilaf of the Quran and the Sunnah. Like in the early 400, 500, 600 years, philosophy was a huge rise of philosophy. So Allah Almighty sent great scholars who were not only masters of the Quran and the Sunnah, but also of philosophy. They were experts in the entire spectrum of the deen. Experts in the Arabic language, experts in usul, the principles of the deen, experts in maqasid al-shari, experts in every aspect of the deen they mastered, whether it was hadith, whether it was tafsir, whether it was Arabic language. They were very, very, very proficient and expert in this. So when people needed to be reset, they need to be brought back into line, bring back towards the Quran and the Sunnah, to bring people back to the correct teachings, the teachings of the righteous scholars of the last 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 centuries. The way of Imam Shafi'i, the way of Imam Abu Hanifa, the way of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, the way of Imam Malik ibn Anas, the way of Imam al-Ghazali, the way of Imam al-Nawawi, the way of Sayyidina Abdul Qadir al-Ghailani, the way of Muhyiddin ibn al-Arabi, and all the great scholars of this deen, to bring people back to this way and this tradition. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said that my ummah la tajtami'u ummati ala dalala. My ummah will never gather upon misguidance. And alaykum bis sawad al-a'zam. Upon you is the vast majority. Whatever is the sawad al-a'zam, that's what is the way upon you. You should follow that. And we know, especially in this modern day and age, majority of the entire Muslim population falls into one of four schools, major schools: Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, or Hanbali. They fall into these schools. Those who align and aspire and follow and fall into these schools, for them, about them, did Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam do ishara to, that they will be as-sawadul a'zam. They will be the vast majority. And this is why it's important that we hold on to this. And in times of fitna, in times of trial, in times of tribulation, in times of mischief, in times of misguidance, in times of confusion, in times of difficulty, when Muslims leave the path, when they go off the rails, go off the tracks, whether it's in their creed, in their aqidah, or whether it's in their actions, a'mal, in their good deeds, they do bad things, they drink, they smoke, they do haram, all the muharramat, they partake in these. And then not only do they partake in the muharramat and the wrong, but then they deviate from the true path, the way of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, the way of As-Sawadul A'zam, the way of the great A'immah of the past, the Quran and the Sunnah and the Ijma' of the Ummah. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send, always He will send a man or great men whose mission and task will be what? To bring people back to the correct path. And we know, in the first century, Allah sent one of the great Khalifas, Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Allah Almighty sent Al-Imam Al-A'zam Abu Hanifa. Allah sent Sayyidina Nasir al-Hadith, Sayyidina Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhim. In the second century, or he sent Imam Malik. In the second century, Imam Shafi'i and his student Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. In the third century, he sent Sayyidina Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, the great Imam of Kalam, the great Imam of this deen, Sayyidina Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, Sayyidina Abu Mansur al-Maturidi. In the fourth, he sent the great Imam al-Hakim al-Naysapuri. He sent Imam al-Bayhaqi. In the fifth century, he sent Sayyidina Imam al-Ghazali, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. He sent great men like Sayyidina Abdul Qadir al-Ghailani. In the sixth century, at that time when the century was turning, Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi, Sayyidina Izzuddin ibn Abdus Salam. In the seventh, Imam al-Nawawi, Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, Taqiyuddin al-Subki, Imam al-Subki rahmatullah alayh. In the eighth, Imam al-Bulkini and Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. In the ninth, Sayyidina Imam Jalaluddin Abdul Rahman al-Suyuti. And Sayyidina Abdul Wahhab al-Sha'rani. Imam al-Sha'rani was one of the great Shafi'i scholars. Imam al-Sha'rani was accepted as the great Imam of his time, along with Imam Suyuti rahmatullah alayh. In the 10th, Allah sent the great Imam Rabbani Mujaddid al-Thani, Sayyidina Ahmad Sarhandi al-Faruqi. In the 11th, he sent the great Abdullah ibn Alawi al-Haddad, who resided in Yemen and in that region of the world. He sent Mullah Ali Qari al-Hanafi rahmatullah alayh. He sent Sayyidina Shah Waliullah al-Dehlawi. These are huge names. These are superstars of their time. They're the biggest scholars of that 100 years. The books they've written, the men they've guided, so much of the work and contribution of the deen these people did. They stood against the fitnas. They spoke against the fitnas of the time, and so on and so forth. We have Sayyidina Khalid al-Baghdadi and Shah Abdul Aziz al-Delvi rahmatullah alayh in the 12th century, and we know in the 13th century the great Allama Fazlul Haq al-Khairabadi, Imam al-Kawthari, and in the 14th century, and we had the great Imam Ahmad Rida Khan, Muhaddis Breli rahmatullah alayh, ala Hazrat Imam Ahl Sunnat. Along with him, you had also Qadi Yusuf ibn Ismail al-Nabahani of Lebanon. He wrote many books, guided many people, regarded as the Mujaddid of the last century. And then along with this, you had who? The great Shaykh al-Islam Badruddin al-Hassani of Syria. These are huge scholars. I'm talking in the last 14 centuries. I've mentioned some of the biggest names. I'm talking superstars. Phenomenal, unbelievable. Their contribution to Islam in the last 1400 years, till today people reap the benefits of this. People rely on Mullah Ali Qari's works. People rely on Imam Rabbani Mujaddid al-Thani. In the subcontinent, there was the spread of perennialism, where Akbar, who was the Mughal Sultan at the time, Mughal Emperor at the time, he wanted to combine all world religions into one religion. Hindus with Christians, with Jews, with Muslims, with all of them in one. Marry who you want, do what you want. He wanted to distort entire Islam. He said there was a permissible, you can do this and you can do it like this and you can go like this. This is what he was saying. Get the chair for this gentleman. There's another chair there, get him a chair please. Durushi Pari Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad wa barik wa sallim wa salli alayhi. So this is what was happening. And at that time when this corrupt belief, this corrupt thinking, ideology was spreading vast in the subcontinent, who was writing the letters, Maktubat Rabbaniya? Who was the one who was speaking out against this, writing against this? Who was it? It was Imam Rabbani. Mujaddid al-Fsani, Sheikh Ahmad Faruqi al-Sarhandi rahmatullah alayhi. That was his mission and task. He saved the iman of the Muslims in the subcontinent during his time. And likewise, every 100 years, these men, what did they do? They saved the imans of people. They safeguarded the creed of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Remember, we fall into the category of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. This is the biggest umbrella understanding of the religion of Islam. And all these names I've mentioned, these are people who live their life to the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alihi wa sallama. And we know that Sayyidi Ala Hazrat Imam Ahl Sunnat, who passed away in Ghaliban 1923 Hijri, 1923, just as soon as the Ottoman Empire collapsed, for the duration of the life that he lived. Look at the huge work in the Hanafi school that he did, the Fatawa Ridwiya Sharif. This is how many volumes? We have it in our library, in the library, of all Hanafi fatwas in the Hanafi school. People asked questions, Sayyidi Ala Hazrat gave the answer. From a young age, he was delivering lectures and talks. By the age of 14, he had become a mufti in the deen. He was able to give fatwas. People from all over the world, the subcontinent, sought permission from Sayyidi Ala Hazrat Imam Ahl Sunnat. He lived in the time of the great Muhammad ibn Ja'far al-Kattani, the great Sheikh of Morocco. He took ijazah from Abdul Hayy al-Kattani and others, great scholars, great muhaddithun in hadith. And not only did his contribution in fiqh, in other aspects of the deen, He was a great, prolific poet as well. He was immersed in the love of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And the entire understanding of our deen is found upon what? The deen is found upon Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and our belief in the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Unconditional love. That you love him more than you love your parents, your children. You love him more than you love everything. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من والده وولده والناس أجمعين. None of you will have complete faith until you love me, until I am more beloved to that person, that ummati of mine, then his children, his parents, وَالنَّاسِ أَجْمَعِينَ, all of mankind. He loves me more. And when you love, you remember. And Sayyidi Ala Hazrat Imam Ahl Sunnat, Shah Ahmad Raza Muhaddis Ibrayli Rahmatullah alayhi, this man was deep in the love of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. This was his mission, to ignite the love of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam in the hearts of people. And today, that mission continues. This is what our mission is. This is what our job is. That we spread the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How can we encourage youngsters who are sitting here to love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? How can we inspire them to increase this love? How can we encourage them? How do we teach them? If they don't know who the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is, how do you expect them to love him? And in order to love someone, you need to know who they are. And in order to know them, you need to study. Without studying the deen, without learning about the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, how will you know? So my question, it's a question I've asked in the past as well. In this last week, let's just start with this week. In this last week, how many of us have opened a seerah book on the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and just read one chapter? Whether it's their blessed birth, their blessed childhood, the blessed battles, the ghazawat and the saraya, whether it's their blessed family, whether it's the blessed companions, whether it's their time in Makkah Sharif, their time in Medina Sharif, whether it's the Hajj, whether it was the Hijrah, the migration, how they migrated from Makkah to Medina and the struggle, whether it was the time of hardship, whether it was the times of ease, whether it was the Prophet ﷺ as a husband in their home, whether it was as a father with their children. When's the last time we read about the Prophet ﷺ? Because every time you read a chapter in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, or you listen to a lecture from sound scholars about the life of the Prophet ﷺ, that is you building a connection with the Prophet ﷺ. If I ask you to describe, for example, bila tashbih wa tamshil, no comparison. If I said to one young lad, stand up and describe Cristiano Ronaldo to me, he'll say, he's this tall, he's right-footed, he scored this many goals, he scores with his head, he's world famous, he's got the most following on YouTube, he's going to soon surpass Mr. Beast, he's going to do this, he's going to do this and this. How long you will give me a description of this guy? You'll give me a description of Messi, you'll give me a description of footballers or cricketers or politicians. Describe Imran Khan to me, describe Nawaz Sharif to me, describe this guy to me, and you will give me lengthy descriptions of this. Why? How? You know so much, you see them. Don't you see the Prophet ﷺ? Haven't you read his life? Haven't you read the Shama'il al-Muhammadiyah? How they look, their blessed description. The companions were so in love, so engrossed, so in love with the Prophet ﷺ, that in the Shama'il al-Muhammadiyah of Imam al-Tirmizi, he narrates a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ had 21 white hairs in their blessed beard. If I asked you to count how many white hairs in my beard, you'd say there's no white hairs. I can tell you I have one or maybe two inside the ears from mine. They knew the exact number. Why? Because they could not stop looking at him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When they always looked, observed, that's why they knew this. They had this knowledge. So when's the last time you studied the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? You learn about his life. Because every time you study and you read about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what happens? You build a connection with him. You get closer to him. then you know the Prophet ﷺ would walk like this, they would talk like this. This is why there's a huge debate and discussion, and I conclude on this. Who are the greatest scholars? Are the scholars of fiqh great? Are the scholars of tafsir great? Are the scholars of lugha great? Language, or the scholars of hadith? Yani the scholars who are experts, they say that the muhaddithun, the scholars of hadith, the shaykhul hadith, the one who teaches hadith all the time, the one who lives his life teaching Bukhari Sharif, Muslim Sharif, all these books of hadith to the students, they are the greatest scholars alive. Why? Because they every single day is spent with the Prophet ﷺ. They are always with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They're talking about their blessed life. This is how they did this. This is how they did this. It is narrated from Sayyidina Abu Hurairah narrates, Sayyidina Aisha narrates. Narration. They live their life narrating the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Sayyidi Ala Hazrat Imam Ahl Sunnat, Shah Ahmad Raza Muhaddis Ibrahili Rahmatullah alayhi, our Imam, upon this masjid is found upon the teachings of the great Imam, whose foundation was what? To spread the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hubbur Rasul. This is fard upon us, not sunnah, not nafal. It is lazim, necessary upon every Muslim that he believes and loves Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Without this love, we are incomplete. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He allows us to follow the teachings of our great A'immah, the great Mujaddidun of this ummah, to allow us to follow their footpaths, the way of the Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Keep us firm upon this. وأقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم وآخر دعوايا عن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
الله الله لا إله إلا الله جود علي